hey, we started off with the big one. The big one was the physical changes involved in puberty, right? And we say depending on that pubertic timing, whether you mature early or mature late, can have different sets of consequences, pros and cons, right? Maybe pros in terms of your own brain development, right? So these hormones trigger a lot of neuroplasticity, right? Molding, sculpting still of the brain, neurogenesis, pruning, eliminating things you're not going to be able to use to adapt and survive, new connections in the brain, right? All of these things. So in this class, we'll talk about some other models within the brain. We'll go over Piaget, information processing, social cognition, and then lastly, we'll talk about schooling, right? The impact of the school environment as required in this stage, right? Kind of no way to get around the school aspect, like the social and the academic. All right, during this stage, there is a high sensitivity to alcohol and substance use, partially genetic, right? If mom and dad were users or abusers of particular substances, right? We say you may have a predisposition to also be a user or abuser of a particular substance. This is sort of a vulnerable time, right? It's one you are sort of pressured from your social forces. So you're not sure really how to process your logic mixed in with your emotions, right? The ability to fit in, feel comfortable in an environment. That kind of deals with dual systems model, right? And here we say, hey, some of the typical behaviors of adolescence are because multiple systems in the brain are really not aligning, right? You say, hey, the amygdala is completely formed, right? You're done with the amygdala, which means that your emotional center is done, right? How are you going to really express emotions are complete. On the flip side, you say response inhibition, your ability to suppress responding to stimulus, it's not that, right? You're still in a very sensitive phase. You maybe have heightened responses stimulated by all sorts of things, right? Stimulated by how people look at you. Facial expressions. We know that this time is one of the highest degrees of sensitivity to facial expressions, which means that, hey, there could be some violence, there could be some fights, there could be arguments, triggered just from perception of you think people are looking at you funny, looking at you weird, you feeling vulnerable, right? Have to kick in your introversion because you feel that people are observing you. You're highly sort of sensitive to their face expression. Also, you would have sensitivity to your own expressions, right? You can't control your face, really, at this stage. And that can lead to all sorts of issues. Negative effects of marijuana, we saw that last class, right? Prolonged use of marijuana can lead to stopping a lot of the connections within the neurons, right? Talking about inhibiting that myelin sheath, slowing down the process, how quickly you can think, right? Good things maybe about marijuana, you say, hey, it sort of acts in other areas of brain which activates creativity, right? So a lot of times marijuana use is to activate some forms of creativity by kind of suppressing anxiety and stress. Right? You kind of letting that die down, and you can focus more on abstract thinking. Right? Kind of induces more abstract thinking. Those who use marijuana more highly degree to drop out of school. Right? At this stage, 6% of students are dropouts. Which is really low. I think it's one of the lowest we've seen on the record. So we're doing kind of a lot better, probably because we're able to monitor students more Hey, so we say this dual processing, this dual system models, right? Different timetables. Hey, you're maturing in one area, but you may lag behind in another cognitively, right? You say, hey, one area of my brain has matured. Let's say maybe even my physical body has matured, but my thinking is pretty slow. I'm behind in terms of my peers. I can't really get control of my emotions, but maybe I can think a little bit more rationally than my peers, right? So at this stage, there's a lot of flux going on, right? And that can create inaccurate assessment of situations. The ability to observe your environment and think what's happening as opposed to what's really happening, having good sound judgment. Which means if you think that something is happening that's actually not at this stage, usually respond to it and probably get a negative consequence from it, right? Verbal things, physical things, altercations, situations, talking back to parents, right? Feeling that parents don't understand, no one understands you, no one's been through the things that you've been through, even though logically, like, hey, your parents were alive, they're older, they went through what you went through, right? Exaggerated emotional response. We say, yeah, that amygdala is done. The amygdala is completely done, but the emotional stimuli is still sensitive. So you're gonna respond quickly, emotionally, right? You don't allow time to build up the logic, to sit back and think first. You just kind of activate emotion. I mean, you could burst out crying, right? For no reason at all. Not understanding why you're crying. Boys may exhibit physical aggression, right? Verbal aggression, without really processing the situation and the environment. And then we say the difficulty in processing facial expressions, which means that, hey, you see the facial expressions, you interpret it differently, right? So we see somebody who's like, man, what you looking at? Like, I'm looking at something, right? The wall or something, right? Taking that and running with it. Even with females, right? You feel that you're being judged, you know? I feel like she was judging me, or she hates me, she has something against me, right? Not necessarily true. Last class we talked about risk taking, right? Reward perception. There's a perception to a high degree, a proclivity for reward than the actual assessment of the situation of risk. Right? So we say there's a high degree of risky behavior. Unprotected sex, we saw 20% at this stage, right? Thinking that you can't catch STIs until you finally get it, being like, oh crap, there are real consequences. Even though we were informed about this, we got the information that usually this is what happens. Unwanted pregnancies, right? Thinking that you're an exception to the rule, right? Things don't apply to you. Criminal activity, right? Hey, I'm riding in the car with my boys and we are going to carjack someone with ARs and AKs and guns, and guess what? I don't think we'll get caught. Not only if we get caught, I don't think they'll snitch, right? Someone of an older capacity, like human beings has a tendency person to survive, so eventually everybody snitches. That'd be a logical, rational thought, right? A prejudgment, misjudgment on loyalty that you think people have, a misjudgment on being caught, right, in the act of certain things, a misjudgment of consequences. So a high sensitivity to rewards. You want the rewards, right? So you're able to go beyond risky behaviors, and eventually they don't lead to really great results. This happens throughout the world. This is not limited here to just the United States. This is something that is universal. Piaget, final stage, right? You know, your formal operational. This is it, right? You're able to, it will evolve over time, right? You will mature and grow. But at this stage, you are able to think logically to a degree. Say this all depends on your speed of maturity, to reason, you're able to devise more intricate schemes. You know what, I'll sneak out the house, and this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna wait tomorrow night, go to sleep. I'm gonna like put some clothing and bedding underneath the sheets, make it look like a person here still asleep, open windows, right? You're devising plans, intricate, systematic, right? Intelligence has increased. Something that you'll do in school, you'll devise a plan, right? Everything you're kind of plotting, which shows intelligence. Devise more plans through interactions, right? So which means that you tend to link up with others to devise more schemes, right? Usually not isolated, usually involves someone else. If you're sneaking out of the house, there's some recipient out there to help you in a sort of runaway scheme, right? Those who tend to run away. I always say people who join gangs, right? So we say intricate schemes. Guess what? I have a drug plan. Bet I could make a lot of money selling weed. Right? Bet I could know somebody who sells cocaine. Right? I got to click up with them. This is what we're gonna do. And have a trap house with a stash of drugs here. We get the money here. And we got to have guns too, right? Intricate schemes. Romantic relationships. Hey, mom doesn't really want me dating. Mom and dad doesn't want me dating. I really like you. I love with this person. Oh my gosh, but this is where we're gonna meet up at. I can tell them, I'll hide the text messages. They don't know I got a secret social media page. Not supposed to be on TikTok, but I am. Right? You Snap, my friend Snapchat, yada yada yada. Right? Anything to get there. So we say, all right, clever, very clever. Right? It usually involves other people. The abstract part. Abstract thinking. What's interesting about abstract thinking? How can, say, it impact the brain? How can abstract thinking, right? Because we didn't have this in the previous age groups, right? Say middle childhood, we didn't really have too much abstract thinking. Early childhood, practically none. What's interesting about abstract thinking in terms of brain development? Right? Think that you can philosophize in any way, shape, or form. You actually can create new connections in your brain without a teacher, without even physically moving, without an environment to change. Right? So you said those who have great abstract thinking at this stage, like that's probably a lot of the connections you're making in your brains. Laying in bed, just daydreaming. In class, daydreaming. Right? Plotting things you gotta do, planning. Right? You don't need physical environment to change it all. You're just thinking, what if I do this? What about that? And all of that's creating new connections in the brain. We saw previously, like, hey, you need something physically to happen to make new connections. Somebody has to teach you, learn, give you some physical thing, right? You have to watch a television or a tablet or something like that. But here we say, hey, this is different, right? Creativity comes out a lot. Right, thus is your beginning of really potential careers. Like, hey, I realized what I could do with my body, contorted. Maybe I'll become a gymnast. You know, I'll become a very exceptional gymnast at 15 or 16. Maybe Olympian, right? Art, right? Understanding that you can paint, identifying that you are great at music. And now we see the phenomenon of all these different celebrities who may have started at a very young age, right? Partially because of the abstract thought process. You're able to hypothesize. So you say you have a scientific mind, which means you're testing. Right? Like, man, I wonder if I did this, what will happen? I think this will happen. I think this will happen, right? You test it. Get a bad consequence, and like, okay, maybe I shouldn't do that. Trial and error, right? It's limited compared to adults, right? It's limited because we say you're still on this model, this dual system model, right? The hippocampus is pumping out hormones, but to what degree it is, it's different for each individual, right? Your emotional center is complete, but that means you're to be highly emotional. It's done logically, your prefrontal cortex hasn't caught up. It means like your logic and your emotions are completely skewed, right? So it's limited. As older adults, we kind of balance out, right? I used to do, and I would say maybe contextual things matter, environment matters. All right, so I used to do research with Mexican drug cartels. I do therapy with former child soldiers in Africa, victims of sexual violence. And a lot of time they're curious as to why I don't really, not shocked with anything, right? Like beheadings, mutilations, people going through trauma. And say from my environment, and one thing I may have matured a little quicker, right, than others in certain ways, in certain aspects. I say physically, I tell you I was about 5'4" as a junior, and I was this height as a senior. So say physically, maybe not so much. Psychologically, mentally, yeah, maybe to a high degree, right? Be like, hey, I was observing people and I can easily gauge people's motives, intentions, insecurities, vulnerabilities. So I had a very low stimulus response even to things that would be normally shocking to the average person, right? So that part of my brain evolved very quickly, right? All right, information processing, selective attention. This can impact academic achievement, your ability to focus, to complete an actual task and goal at this stage, right? It's getting even worse now because of the technology. Right? Think about, say when I was in grade school or high school. Let's say, think about in high school, we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have laptops, we didn't have tablets. So let me ask you, what would you do in class if you didn't have phones, laptops, or tablets? How would that change your behavior? You think you'd be very stressed? Let's say in college courses, if they told you to take it away, how do you think your response would be? Think you'd be able to handle it? Who thinks it would be a challenge for them? Right? Probably a challenge for all of us. I mean, we're no exception. Think about it. In some way, universally, we may have a common disorder, a technology disorder. The average person, whether your age or my age, pulls out their phone how many times in a day? Right? A few hundred times a day. How much time we spend looking at YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram? Right? In a day, it's compulsory. You're like, okay, you have all the information in the universe in your pocket, then it means we should all be billionaires. We should all not need to go to school. But here we are. Right? So it shows like, hey, we have something compulsive that actually probably doesn't benefit us to the degree to which we use it. Right? 99% useless information that we probably won't even retain, but it's still the dopamine effect. You can see the next TikTok. Go on TikTok shop, finding something on TikTok. So we have selective attention, where you can focus on one stimulus and kind of let the background noise. You're still picking up information from background environment stimulus, but you're able to focus on one. Divided attention is probably what most of us are doing now. We say, hey, you know what, I'm listening, I'm focusing on that, but I'm also doing some other stuff as well too, right? All the data suggests it just means that our performance, our expertise in an area will suffer. Like it'll take us longer to become experts in an area because we don't give it the right attention that it needs. Right? Attention does increase during adolescence though, right? So you are kind of able to, you become better multitaskers than you did previously, right? In middle childhood. You are better multitaskers, which means you can write the notes, look on Facebook or Instagram, also listen to Spotify, some music, right? You can do like 8 things at once, right? You can actually achieve it. Maybe not to the greatest degree, but you're able to do it, right? So this attention really increases, particularly with multitasking during this stage. All right, improvements in working memory at this stage. You say, hey, you know what? I can cram in for the test. My working memory is good. I can't stay there long, but I am able to hold a lot of information for a lot better than I did previously, right? You use memory strategies, mnemonics, such as what? What are some mnemonics that you use in school? Things to help you memorize things.
Flashcards or something? Like flashcards?
All right, you say flashcards, right? You have flashcards, small bits of information about larger things. What else?
Color coding. Color coding.
Yeah, color coding, right? You go into high school, you see somebody's book that they have, and all those color-coded tabs, right? Notes. What else? Like, what did you use in high school to help you memorize stuff?
I would like to make up words that fit with, like for example, with the Google electron, it's oxidation, so I'd be like real. Then when you gain an electron, it's reduction, something like nerve, so you have real, it's angry, I don't know.
No, I mean, that's absolutely a good strategy. Like, hey, I don't need the full words, right? I can show them the word and remember. We create acronyms. Roy G. did, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, right? And even now, think about that. Someone goes on social media and type like this long acronym, 50 things long, and we literally can still understand it, right? Like, we understand like an entire paragraph and it's just letters, no words, right? We kind of understand that we can associate things with different things, right? Smaller things with larger context of things. Response inhibition is low, right? And we already saw that you are a little bit more sensitive to being stimulated to your environment as opposed to someone else older. Some influence on contextual factors. When we say contextual factors, is race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, right? Things like poverty, enriched environments, and culture. In what way do you think that, or maybe we could talk about this in group. So, contextually, what can make one have less inhibition to response, which means that they're easily triggered to response. They're extremely sensitive to respond to any sort of stimulation in the environment based on race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and culture. I'll let you discuss that in groups for a few minutes. What ways do those factors can make someone have quick levels of response? Very sensitive people to respond to anything, right? How is that shaped by those factors? Give me some examples.
Sensitive people, what could make that happen?
What could make somebody sensitive?
Yeah.
Yes, thoughts over here?
You're thinking like based on your culture or like background, you're gonna be disrespectful if you don't respond right away, so maybe they like respond quicker.
Yeah, you're like, hey, in my environment, you don't respond quickly is deemed to be disrespectful, right? In any way, shape, or form. Right, well, that's kind of maybe a negative thing because maybe it doesn't allow you to properly think and judge before you respond, right? So you get, now you come into an environment, we say a school environment, where we're all trying to be homogenous, right? We're all trying to be on the same level. And we have some people from different levels who are just responding too quick without really processing their thoughts. Any thoughts over here? Anything?
We said, larger peer groups would probably influence, less, response time.
Larger peer group. So the larger group of friends that you have will probably enable you to have better sort of response skills, response timing, as opposed to say someone who's a little bit more isolated, right? They're being maybe a little bit more triggered to response because they don't have the sort of experience, right, of gauging a lot of people interacting and not responding quickly to them. Thoughts here? Yeah. All right, kind of same thing, right? Respond quickly, but you're saying here they want it to be correct. Right, so maybe they're reinforcing quick thinking, but also quick judgments with quick responses, right? And that's actually good. Like, hey, you're able, if you're conditioned that way, you're probably able to do better at school academically than others who haven't been challenged that way. You've been challenged to respond and also think about it quicker. Some households may say, hey, you know what? Hey, before you respond, think about it. How about you think about it and come back and tell me, right? And that's also positive. Like, hey, those kids may be a little bit more introspective, a little bit more deep thinkers. They wait, and they ponder on it. And then they come to a good conclusion. Maybe a more rational sound conclusion of someone who just quickly responds and think about it, right? What do you think back here?
You said an age, cause like, I don't know, I thought like with a toddler, like they could fall, remember like good, but they cry right away. I know we're talking about adolescence, and maybe like how they learn to be like.
Okay. So it really just depends on the age, or maybe just say maturity to some degree. All right, so yeah, we say, hey, sometimes that can help increase processing speed if we are in an environment where we're being challenged. We think being challenged is good, we're all competing. Expertise affects on processing speed. You're saying, hey, not only be quick, but try to be right in quick. Why? Because you will beat out your peers. You will be more successful than them, right? They are not conditioning themselves to respond in an accurate way than other sort of parents. Some parents are very uninvolved, and the schools are uninvolved, and like, hey, hence why they have the outcomes that they have in terms of thinking. Metacognition. Do you know what metacognition is? Thoughts about thoughts, right? Your ability to think about your own thinking, which is really, really good. Because now you're truly trying to understand, right? There's this voice in my head that's talking constantly, right? But what is that voice? And is that voice accurate? Right? Is that voice accurate? This helps in trying to understand ourselves better. So adolescents who participate in more metacognition, like thinking about their thoughts, tend to highly succeed far more than those who don't, which means they're just more carnal, physical, they respond to the physical environment, got more internalized awareness, right, your own thought process. Like, hey, I wonder why I behave this way, right? I try to do that with my 3-year-old. I'm like, hey, you know, Go think about it. Why do you think you behave that way? And then she's like, what? What are you talking about? I had no idea. It increases problem solving skills, right? Because you can question your own logic. You're like, hey, I see how I'm doing something, but I also got to challenge myself to say, maybe I think I'm right, right? But am I truly right? Right? Being able to understand yourself and your own sort of motivational skills to push you to solve problems, right? Your own confidence levels. Are you overconfident? You need more confidence, right? Social cognition, social perspective taking, right? You say, hey, now we are able to, there's social cognition. We were primarily egocentric before. We may still be egocentric, but we may be a little bit more mature. In the sense that, hey, we're not gonna get our way, right? We're in school, there's rules, there's policies, there's things you gotta do, right? Before, mom and dad let me get away with all this stuff, but now coming into an environment where there's rules, I have to actually be a little bit more mature. I'm not gonna win all the arguments. People have their own perspective, right? The acknowledgement, people have their own perspectives. If not matured enough, then you say, hey, I don't care about your perspective. You should believe in what I believe in. How come you don't have the same political views, right? We're gonna cancel you. How dare you? I'll never talk to you ever again. Right? We say a level of maturity, you'd be like, oh, you know, humans are humans. They believe what they believe based on their own upbringing, culture, social, blah, 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 right? A little bit more mature thought. Some do become egocentric, though, more egocentric than middle childhood, right? And I would say probably, hey, if you evolve very fast with puberty, and now you're getting a lot of attention, right? Very positive ways, we say that reward center, you're gonna love that attention so much, like, shares, views, right? In real life too, not just on social media. So you're gonna do your best to reinforce that brand, your personal brand. You're selling yourself, marketing yourself, right? You're trying to be the top person in your peer group, which can create, more egocentric behavior, a little bit of narcissism. There's a tendency to understand now the societal environment larger. Like, wow, okay. So people do have human rights. What's that all about? People do have political ideologies. Which one do I have? Who do I support, right? Which ideological thought? People do have religious beliefs. I was raised on one, and maybe now I challenge it, but I don't know. I disagree, mom and dad. I don't know if I feel the same way about it. Right? You can't force me, mom and dad, to be the same religion. I'm not interested. So you're starting to understand larger social things, and now you get involved, movements, right? You become a little bit more social advocacy, right? You join groups in high schools to promote saving the environment, save the whales, right? Help these individuals who need help, a little bit more nurturing aspect. But decision-making is poor. We say a prefrontal cortex, still got a long way to go. That probably finishes between 25, latest 27, and if you're only 14, 15, 18, you haven't caught up. So you still need protection. Parents still need to guide you properly in order for this. Lastly, school, right? Grades tend to decline through the transitionings of school, which means you're going from middle school to high school. Grades will typically decline at the beginning, depending on the school environment, how good the teachers are, the activities that they have will show who will be successful or not. So you make good environment fit. You have particular needs based on your own home context, race, ethnic needs, right? Cultural needs, and the school should supply it. Unfortunately, not all schools have the means. You say, why? Well, you're living in poverty, right? You gotta go to the public education system. And maybe public education is good to some degree, but say maybe in certain neighborhoods have some really bad schools. We just describe them as bad schools. Bad, how, why? They have no extracurricular activities, no athletic program, no art. They don't emphasize on science, right? The STEM aspect. And you say those students are setting themselves up for failures because maybe the parents failed them, I would say. Good schools, teachers set high standards. In life, we're competing. Who's gonna be the top dog? In school, we should be competing too, right? So we're all competing. So teachers should set the highest standards possible in order to make everyone highly competitive, because that's the real world. It appears that lagging students have a harder time through the transitional phase, right? Like moving into high school, have a little bit more time in terms of the adjustment. Kind of makes sense, you know, with, what time is it? Maybe, you know, cultural differences, things of that nature, maybe a good, an adjustment needed because we are a very Americanized system of education, and that takes some adaptation to get to. Personalized learning helps, right, and academic support. Personalized learning is, think of this. In theory, most schools say, okay, we all gonna take the same tests, we're all gonna do the same homework, and it's all due at the same time, and I expect all of you to perform a certain way. You know, like, that really doesn't make sense. We are all different. We just saw that people mature quicker than others. Different parts of the brain get caught up versus others. So with personalized learning, we're like, hey, you know what? Maybe teachers develop a program to meet the needs of individual students. Maybe there are a group of students who are homogenous and they all kind of work on the same level. Maybe there's some other students who need reinforcement, who use technology to kind of analyze them to see what areas we need to help them. And that will help them be more successful. As opposed to standard of learning your homework this day, good luck. Right? We said we don't know if that really is the most effective way. And school involvement is highly important, right? Athletics, extracurricular activities helps promote socialization processes that all helps you to be better as an adult. Okay, that'll be it. I will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. And group 4, who's group 4?